The Arizona Territory, 1875. Dust hangs like copper mist in the evening air as drunken settlers push a bound young woman toward a lone Apache warrior. Their cruel laughter drowns her terrified whimpers. Consider her a gift, savage? The ringleader sneers, expecting violence or humiliation. Instead, the warrior's face remains impassive as he cuts her bonds with one swift motion and positions her safely behind his horse. The settlers ride away, disappointed by the failed entertainment, unaware of the approaching danger. Hours later, when bandits descend on their camp, only one man returns to fight for them. The same Apache warrior they mocked, with the woman now standing confidently at his side. As firelight illuminates their faces, something unspoken passes between them. Can a cruel joke become the beginning of a bond stronger than the hatred that surrounds them? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Miller clutched her mother's prayer book to her chest as the Arizona sun beat down upon Copper Creek. At 19, she was a woman grown by frontier standards. Yet her uncle Jedediah still treated her like a burdensome child. 5 years had passed since her missionary parents succumbed to fever, leaving her in the care of a man who saw her as nothing more than another mouth to feed. The schoolhouse bell rang, releasing a flood of children into the dusty street. Sarah smiled despite her weariness. Teaching brought her joy, even if it was only as an assistant to Mrs. Hathaway. The children's curiosity reminded her of simpler days, before she understood the harshness of this unforgiving land. Miss Miller, young Emma Pearson tugged at her skirts. Will you tell us more stories about the Indians tomorrow? The peaceful ones your mama told you. Sarah glanced nervously at the child's father waiting nearby. Mr. Pearson's scowl said everything. Perhaps another time, Emma, Sarah whispered, patting the girl's head. Run along now. In Copper Creek, speaking kindly of the Apache was akin to treason. The recent treaty violations had tensions pulled taut as a bowstring. Both sides claimed the other struck first, and Sarah had learned to keep her parents' tolerant teachings private. She made her way to her uncle's general store, stepping around groups of men whose conversations fell silent as she passed. Their eyes followed her, the missionary girl who didn't quite belong. There she is. Her uncle's voice boomed from the saloon entrance. Jedediah Miller swayed slightly, already deep in his cups though the sun still hung above the mountains. Beside him stood his constant companions. Frank Dawson, whose cold eyes always lingered too long. Eli Cooper, a man of few words and fewer smiles, and Tobias Burke, whose nervous laugh punctuated every cruel jest. Sarah, girl, where you been? Store's been empty all afternoon. Jedediah's words slurred together. It's Tuesday, Uncle. I assist at the school on Tuesdays. Dawson stepped forward, blocking her path. Educating savages now, are we? Your uncle says your parents filled your head with nonsense about the Apache being people same as us. Sarah clutched the prayer book tighter. Excuse me, Mr. Dawson. I need to reopen the store. Let her be, Frank, Jedediah mumbled, more concerned with keeping his balance than defending his niece. As Sarah slipped past, Burke called after her. Better stay close to town, Miss Miller. Word is that lone Apache scout's been seen again. The one they call Dakota. Laughter followed her down the street. The name Dakota had been whispered for weeks. Some said he was a ghost, others a spy. All agreed he was dangerous. Inside the store, Sarah locked the door and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. The prayer book's worn leather cover offered comfort as she traced the faded gold cross. Opening to a familiar passage, she read her mother's handwriting in the margin. All God's children deserve compassion, Sarah. Remember this when others forget. The settlement had forgotten if it ever knew at all. Copper Creek was built on stolen land, though none would admit it. The saloon saw more faithful attendants than the church, and men like her uncle used the Bible to justify their hatred rather than overcome it. Through the window, Sarah watched as the day's last light painted the distant mountains in shades of amber and crimson. Somewhere out there, beyond the boundaries of her small world, the Apache lived as they had for generations. Among them, perhaps, was the scout named Dakota, watching and waiting for what no one knew. A crash from the back room startled her. Sarah found her uncle fumbling through a trunk, tossing papers and trinkets onto the floor. "Where is it?" he growled, not acknowledging her presence. "What are you looking for, uncle?" "My silver watch. Need it for tonight's game." His bloodshot eyes narrowed. "You haven't taken it, have you?" "Of course not." Sarah helped him search, eventually finding the timepiece beneath his bed. Jedediah snatched it from her hand. "I'm going to win big tonight. Then maybe we can send you back east where you belong. You're too soft for this territory." After he stumbled out, Sarah gathered the scattered papers. Among them was a letter from the bank. The words "final notice" and "foreclosure" stood out in bold print. Her hands trembled as understanding dawned. They were in danger of losing everything. Outside, the voices of her uncle and his friends grew louder, boasting of how they would solve the Indian problem once and for all. Sarah closed her eyes and held the prayer book closer, her mother's words echoing in her mind. But on this night, compassion seemed as scarce as water in the desert that surrounded them. The Silver Dollar Saloon pulsed with raucous energy as Jedediah Miller slapped his cards onto the worn felt table. Lantern light glinted off his prized silver pocket watch as he nervously twisted its chain around his finger. The timepiece had been his father's, one of the few items of value he hadn't yet gambled away. "Your bet, Miller." Frank Dawson's voice cut through the haze of tobacco smoke. His eyes, calculating and cold, tracked every nervous twitch of Jedediah's face. "Give a man time to think," Jedediah muttered, counting his dwindling pile of coins for the third time. The whiskey in his glass did nothing to sharpen his wits, but he drained it anyway. Eli Cooper leaned back in his chair, expressionless save for the slight curl of his lip. "Time costs money in poker, Jed." Tobias Burke giggled, a sound that belonged to a much younger man. "Or are you waiting for divine intervention? Maybe your niece's prayers might help." The men laughed, and Jedediah felt heat rise in his collar. He'd lost nearly everything already. The store's monthly earnings, next week's liquor shipment money, even the cash set aside for Sarah's keep. All gone to Dawson's superior play or superior luck. He couldn't decide which. "I'll raise," Jedediah finally announced, pushing forward his last coins. Dawson matched and revealed his cards with a flourish. Full house. Jedediah stared at the winning hand, then at his own pathetic pair of threes. His stomach soured as Dawson gathered the pot. "I believe that cleans you out, Miller," Dawson said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Unless you've got something else to wager?" Jedediah's hand moved instinctively to his pocket watch. Dawson noticed. "That's a fine timepiece. Family heirloom?" "Not for gambling," Jedediah mumbled, though his fingers still worked the chain. "Shame." Dawson signaled for another round of drinks. "I'd have given you a chance to win everything back." The whiskey arrived, and Jedediah stared into its amber depths, seeing his own desperation reflected back. The bank notice flashed in his mind, just 2 weeks until they took everything. "How much would you stake against it?" he asked, removing the watch from his pocket. A gleam lit Dawson's eyes. "Everything you've lost tonight, plus 50 more." The table fell silent. It was a generous offer, too generous. Suspicion nagged at Jedediah's whiskey-soaked mind, but the promise of redemption proved stronger. "Deal," he said, placing the watch in the center of the table. The cards were dealt. Jedediah's hand trembled as he arranged them, finding 2 pairs, kings and tens. A strong hand. Perhaps luck was turning. Dawson's face revealed nothing as they traded cards. Jedediah held, confident in his pairs. "Let's see what you've got," Dawson finally said. Jedediah laid down his cards with a triumphant smile. 2 pair, kings high. Dawson nodded appreciatively, then slowly spread his cards. 3 queens. The room spun as Jedediah watched Dawson pick up the silver watch. Something precious, something irreplaceable, now gone like everything else. I'm ruined, he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Dawson pocketed the watch, then leaned forward. Not necessarily, Jed. I might be willing to consider an alternative payment. What alternative? I've nothing left. Dawson's eyes drifted toward the saloon window. Outside, a figure on horseback was just visible in the fading light, the Apache scout who had been seen around town. There he is again, Dawson hissed, watching us like we're prey. The men turned to look. Even from a distance, the Apache's presence commanded attention. He sat motionless on his horse at the edge of town, silhouetted against the sunset. Dakota, Burke whispered, as if saying the name might summon the man closer. Dawson's face hardened. My brother died by Apache hands 3 years ago, left a wife and 2 children behind. He turned back to Jedediah. I've been thinking about teaching them a lesson about boundaries. What's that got to do with my debt? Jedediah asked, confusion mixing with dread. A slow smile spread across Dawson's face. Your niece, she's a pretty thing. Educated too, from what I hear. Jedediah's brow furrowed. Sarah? What about her? I propose a little joke, Dawson continued. One that solves both our problems. The Apache seems so interested in our town. Let's give him something to remember us by. As understanding dawned, Jedediah's face paled. You can't mean. A gift, Dawson interrupted. We present your niece to the savage. Tell him she's his to keep. He laughed at Jedediah's horrified expression. Don't worry, we'll follow and take her back before anything happens. Just want to see the look on that red devil's face when he realizes we're mocking him. That's madness, Jedediah protested weakly. Sarah's my brother's child. And this, Dawson tapped the pocket containing the watch, was your father's. Which matters more? Besides, no harm will come to her. Just a bit of fun at the Indians' expense. Jedediah stared into his empty glass, moral compromise battling financial desperation. Finally, he nodded, sealing Sarah's fate with a gesture as small as it was damning. Just a joke, he repeated, trying to convince himself. No harm done. Sarah knew something was wrong the moment her uncle entered the store at dawn, Frank Dawson and the others trailing behind him like shadows. Jedediah couldn't meet her eyes, his gaze darting around the room like a cornered animal's. Sarah, there's trouble at the Henderson place, he said, voice unnaturally high. Riders spotted. Need you to come identify some things that might have been stolen from the school. She frowned. The school hasn't reported anything missing. Just come, girl. Jedediah snapped, then softened his tone. Please, Sarah. It's important. Something in his manner made her skin prickle with unease, but she nodded and fetched her shawl. The men exchanged glances as she followed them to the waiting horses. Where's Mrs. Henderson? Sarah asked as Dawson helped her mount, his hands lingering too long at her waist. Staying with relatives in town, Tobias Burke answered quickly. After the trouble. They rode for nearly an hour, far beyond the Henderson farm, following a narrow trail into the foothills. The terrain grew rougher, scattered with sage and mesquite. When Sarah pointed out they'd passed the Henderson place miles back, Jedediah muttered something about tracking the thieves. Uncle, please tell me what's really happening, she finally demanded as they stopped in a small clearing. The men dismounted, and dread pooled in her stomach when Dawson produced a length of rope. It's for your protection, her uncle stammered, not looking at her. In case we encounter hostiles. Before she could protest, Dawson seized her wrists, binding them tightly while Burke giggled nervously. Only then did Jedediah meet her gaze, shame evident in his bloodshot eyes. Uncle, Sarah cried, struggling against the bonds. What are you doing? "It's just a joke, Sarah," he mumbled. "No harm will come to you." Dawson's grip tightened painfully on her arm. "We're going to introduce you to someone," he said, voice honeyed with mock courtesy. "An Apache brave who's been scouting our town. Thought he might appreciate some female company." Horror washed over Sarah as understanding dawned. "You can't be serious. This is barbaric." "Relax," Eli Cooper grunted, checking his rifle. "We'll be watching. Just want to see the savage's reaction when we offer him a white woman." "You're making a gift of me to an Apache warrior?" Sarah's voice rose in disbelief. "As a joke. He probably won't even touch you," Burke added with another nervous giggle. "They're afraid of white women. Bad medicine, they say." Sarah turned to her uncle, tears burning her eyes. "How could you agree to this?" Jedediah looked away, fingering the empty pocket where his watch should be. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. From his position among the rocks, Dakota watched the approaching riders with cautious interest. 4 men and 1 woman, the latter clearly in distress. His hand moved to the beaded medicine pouch at his neck, a gesture of protection taught by his grandfather. At 28 winters, Dakota had earned respect among the people, as the Apache called themselves. His scouting missions provided valuable information about the encroaching settlers, their numbers and movements. Today's observations had taken an unexpected turn. He remained perfectly still as the group halted 50 paces away. The settlers' intentions were unclear, but the bound woman suggested nothing good. Dakota's dark eyes narrowed as the men dismounted, leaving the woman on her horse. His people's interactions with white settlers had taught him caution. The bluecoats spoke of peace while building forts on D-land. The settlers claimed friendship while fencing ancestral hunting grounds. Trust came at a fatal price. Yet something about this scene demanded his attention. The woman's terror was genuine, her captivity enforced by her own kind. This was no typical settler party. Dakota weighed his options. Revealing himself risked his mission and possibly his life. Remaining hidden meant abandoning the woman to whatever fate these men planned. Neither choice sat well with the teachings of the mountain spirits who guided him. Decision made, he mounted his painted stallion and rode slowly into view, rifle across his lap but not raised. The medicine pouch bounced gently against his chest with each step of the horse. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. "There he is," Dawson hissed, spotting the approaching Apache. Right on time. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she saw the warrior for the first time. Unlike the savage creature from Fireside Tales, this man carried himself with quiet dignity. His black hair hung in 2 braids framing a face carved from desert stone. Most striking were his eyes, dark, watchful, betraying no fear despite being outnumbered. "Remember," Dawson whispered to the others. "Make it convincing, then we grab the girl and go." He shoved Sarah forward, causing her to stumble. The Apache warrior halted his horse, expression unchanged as he assessed the strange tableau before him. "Hello, savage," Dawson called out, false joviality in his voice. "We've brought you something. A gift from Copper Creek." Sarah stood trembling, humiliation and fear warring within her as the men laughed. The warrior's gaze shifted to her, then to her bound hands, then back to the settlers. Still, his face revealed nothing. "Consider her a gift," Dawson continued, his sneer evident even through his forced smile. "Pretty little thing, isn't she? All yours now." Sarah closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. She heard the soft creak of leather as the Apache dismounted, his footsteps approaching slowly. When she opened her eyes, he stood before her, not with lust or cruelty, but with a quiet assessment that seemed to see beyond her tears to the dignity they couldn't take from her. In one fluid motion, his knife appeared and sliced through her bonds. The silence between them stretched like the vast Arizona sky as Sarah rubbed her chafed wrists. The settlers had departed minutes ago, their raucous laughter fading into the distance. Dawson's parting words still hung in the air. "Enjoy your savage, Miss Miller. We'll tell the town how you went willingly." Now she stood alone with the Apache warrior, Dakota they had called him. He had returned his knife to its sheath and stood a respectful distance away, watching her with unreadable eyes. Sarah swallowed hard. Would he kill her? Take her captive? The stories told in hushed whispers around Copper Creek painted Apache warriors as merciless, but the man before her had shown only restraint. "Thank you," she finally whispered, lifting her freed wrists slightly. "For cutting the rope." Dakota tilted his head, seeming to consider her words. After a moment he spoke, his English halting but clear enough. "Not right," he said, gesturing toward where the settlers had disappeared. "Their ways, not honorable." Sarah's surprise must have shown on her face, for a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You speak English," she breathed. "Some words. Learn from trading." He paused, studying her. "Why they bring you?" Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. How could she explain the cruel joke? My uncle lost everything gambling. They thought it would be amusing to offer me to you, as if I were property." Dakota's expression darkened. "Women not property. Children not property. White men strange." Despite everything, Sarah felt an unexpected laugh bubble up. "Yes, they can be very strange." Dakota moved to his horse and untied a canteen from the saddle. He approached slowly, offering it to her. Sarah hesitated only briefly before accepting. The water was cool and sweet against her parched throat. "Thank you," she said again, returning the canteen. He nodded, then gestured toward the sun, which had begun its descent toward the western horizon. "Dark soon. I take you back to settlement." Relief washed over Sarah, followed swiftly by a new fear. "I can't go back there. Not after this. They'll say I—" She couldn't finish the thought. Dakota considered her words. "Where then?" "I don't know," she admitted, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. She was alone in the territory with no family who truly cared for her welfare. He seemed to sense her distress. "Sit," he said, pointing to a flat rock in the shade of a juniper tree. "Rest. Think." Sarah obeyed, grateful to be off her trembling legs. Dakota moved a short distance away, giving her space while scanning the horizon with practiced eyes. She watched him, noting the quiet confidence in his movements, so different from the blustering swagger of men like Frank Dawson. As the minutes passed, an unexpected calm settled over her. Whatever happened next, she was no longer bound, physically or to her uncle's cruelty. "Water." Dakota offered the canteen again, interrupting her thoughts. This time, Sarah accepted without hesitation. As she drank, their fingers brushed, and she was struck by how such a simple human contact could bridge the vast divide between their worlds. "Your name?" he asked. "Sarah. Sarah Miller." He nodded. "Sarah." The way he pronounced it, carefully separating the syllables, made it sound new to her ears. "And you're Dakota?" "Yes. Means friend to all in Dakota language. My mother from Northern Tribe." "It's a good name," Sarah said softly. They lapsed into silence again, but it felt less strained now. The sun continued its descent, painting the landscape in gold and amber. In the distance, a hawk circled lazily on thermal currents. Suddenly, Dakota stiffened, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Sarah followed his line of sight but saw nothing unusual. "What is it?" "Riders," he said, voice tight. "Not settlers. Different." Sarah strained her eyes. "I don't see anything. They come to your people's camp. Bad men." He turned to her, decision made. "Must warn them." "Warn them? But they just—" Sarah stopped, astonished. "You would help the men who treated you so poorly? Who tried to humiliate you with their gift?" Takota's expression was solemn. Many wrongs between our peoples. More wrong not to warn of danger. He extended his hand to her. Come. Choice yours. Stay or ride with Takota. Sarah looked at his outstretched hand, then back to the empty trail that led to Copper Creek. The settlement held nothing for her now. No family, no future, only shame and whispered accusations. She placed her hand in his. I'll come with you. Something flickered in Takota's dark eyes. Approval, perhaps. He helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Hold tight, he instructed as the horse began to move. As they rode toward the settlers' camp, Sarah felt the first tentative thread of trust form between them. Fragile as a spider's silk, but surprisingly strong twilight painted the desert in deepening shades of purple as Takota guided his horse toward the settlers' camp. Sarah clung to the saddle, the rhythm of hoofbeats matching her racing heart. The Apache's body was warm behind her, his presence both foreign and reassuring. How do you know they're bandits? She asked over her shoulder. See dust pattern. Not soldiers. Not Apache. These men ride without care who hears. Takota's breath tickled her ear. Bandits take what they want. Kill who they want. They crested a rise, and Sarah spotted the settlers' camp below. 3 wagons circled near a small creek, campfires already glowing in the gathering darkness. Her uncle and his friends had been joined by 2 other families traveling to Tucson. Women and children down there, she whispered, horror threading through her voice. Takota nodded grimly. 6, maybe 7 bandits coming. Your people have guns. Yes, but they've been drinking since noon. His arm tightened slightly around her waist as he urged the horse faster. The camp appeared peaceful as they approached. A woman stirred a pot over the fire. Children played a game with stones. The men passed a bottle around, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. That laughter died abruptly when Jedediah spotted them. What in God's name? Dawson lurched to his feet, hand moving to his pistol. Look who's returned. The savage brings back our gift. Sarah slid from the horse before Takota could dismount. Listen to me. There are bandits coming. Shut your mouth, girl, Dawson snarled, advancing on her. You've disgraced yourself enough. The other settlers had risen now, the women pulling children behind them, the men reaching for weapons. Takota remained mounted, still as stone under their hostile glares. Please, Sarah begged. There's no time for this. Takota saw riders approaching. Takota? Jedediah spat. You're on first-name terms with him already? A woman stepped forward, Mrs. Henderson, whose farm had been the pretense for Sarah's abduction. What's happening here? Before anyone could answer, Takota dismounted in a fluid motion, his obsidian knife gleaming in his hand. The settlers recoiled, but he merely pointed it toward the eastern ridge. They come, he said simply. A distant gunshot punctuated his words, followed by the thunder of approaching horses. As if released from a spell, the camp erupted into motion. Men scrambled for rifles, women gathered children, and Frank Dawson stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. Get behind the wagons, Takota commanded, his voice carrying unexpected authority. When no one moved, he switched to Sarah. Tell them, now. Do as he says. Sarah shouted, already herding the children toward the wagons. Get down and stay quiet. Whether it was her familiar voice or the undeniable threat, the settlers obeyed. Takota positioned himself at the edge of camp, knife in one hand, rifle in the other. Sarah joined him, ignoring her uncle's hissed protests. You should hide, Takota told her without looking away from the approaching riders. I'm not leaving you alone, she replied, picking up a discarded iron skillet. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Brave Sarah. The first bandit crested the ridge, silhouetted against the darkening sky. 6 more followed, their whoops carrying on the night air, predators confident in their hunt. "They think easy prey," Dakota murmured. "Not expect fight." The first shots came from the bandits, wild and poorly aimed. One of the settlers returned fire, the bullet finding its mark. A bandit tumbled from his saddle with a cry. Then chaos erupted. Horses charged into camp, bandits firing indiscriminately. Dakota moved like a desert wind, his knife finding one man's thigh while his rifle but cracked against another's jaw. Sarah stayed close behind him, swinging the skillet at a bandit who came too near the children's hiding place. Through the mayhem, Sarah glimpsed her uncle cowering behind a wagon wheel. Nearby, Dawson fired his pistol with shaking hands, more danger to friend than foe. Only Eli Cooper showed any real fighting skill, dropping a bandit with a well-placed shot. A scream pierced the night. One of the Henderson children had broken cover. A bandit wheeled his horse toward the sound, raising his pistol. Without hesitation, Dakota threw his knife. The blade embedded itself in the bandit's shoulder, spoiling his aim. The shot went wild as Sarah pulled the child to safety. Blood and firelight painted Dakota's face in stark relief as he retrieved his knife from the fallen bandit. Their eyes met across the chaos, something unspoken passing between them. Then he was moving again, a shadow among shadows, defending people who had mocked him hours before. Sarah pressed the trembling child into his mother's arms and turned back to the fight, the iron skillet heavy in her hands but her resolve unwavering. Whatever came next, she would not hide. Dawn broke over a changed camp. The night's violence had left its mark on land and people alike. Blood-stained earth, a wounded settler moaning softly, 3 dead bandits lying where they had fallen. The survivors moved like ghosts, faces haggard in the pale morning light. Sarah tore another strip from her already tattered shawl, now more bandage than garment. She knelt beside young Thomas Burke, Tobias's son, who had taken a bullet to the shoulder. "Hold still," she murmured, pressing the cloth against the wound. The boy whimpered but obeyed, his eyes fixed on something beyond her shoulder. Sarah turned to find Dakota approaching, carrying fresh water from the creek. Throughout the night, he had moved between wounded settlers with quiet efficiency, his knowledge of healing herbs proving as valuable as his fighting skills. "For clean," he said, setting down the water. From a pouch at his waist, he produced a handful of crushed leaves. "For pain." Thomas's eyes widened with fear, but Sarah smiled reassuringly. "It's medicine, like Dr. Wilson gives in town, but from plants instead of bottles." The boy relaxed slightly as Dakota demonstrated how to make a poultice. His gentle hands belied the strength that had dispatched 2 bandits during the attack. Sarah watched him work, wondering how she had ever feared this man. Across the camp, Frank Dawson spat into the dirt. "Don't let that savage touch our wounded," he called. "Probably poisoning them." "That savage saved your life last night," Sarah retorted, rising to her feet. "While you were hiding behind the wagon." Dawson's face mottled with rage. "You watch your mouth, girl. You're in enough disgrace already, running off with him." "I didn't run off with anyone. We came back to warn you." "Enough!" Jedediah intervened, his bloodshot eyes darting between them. To Sarah's surprise, he turned to Dawson. "The Apache fought well. Better than some of us." His gaze lingered pointedly on Dawson's unblemished clothes. Mrs. Henderson approached, cradling a steaming cup. "I've made coffee," she said, offering it to Dakota. "It's not much, but thank you. For my children." Dakota accepted with a solemn nod. It was a small gesture, but significant. Perhaps the first time any settler had treated him with genuine respect. As the morning progressed, the camp gradually organized itself. The dead bandits were buried far from the creek. The remaining horses were redistributed, and supplies inventoried. Through it all, Sarah noticed how the settlers now moved around Dakota, not with the earlier fear, but with cautious acknowledgement of his presence. We should head back to town, Eli Cooper announced as they gathered for a meal of hard biscuits and jerky. Henderson's wagon is damaged, but it'll make it. The wounded need proper care. Murmurs of agreement circled the fire. Sarah felt a strange hollowness form in her chest. Return to Copper Creek? After yesterday, the thought held no comfort. What about you, Miss Miller? Mrs. Henderson asked gently. Will you come with us? Before Sarah could answer, Dawson's cold voice cut in. Of course she will, unless she prefers the company of savages to her own kind. Dakota, who had been quietly checking his horse's tack, went still. My own kind, Sarah repeated, a new strength in her voice. My own kind offered me as a joke to a stranger. My own kind abandoned me without a backward glance. She looked at her uncle, who couldn't meet her gaze. My own kind showed less honor than the man they mocked. A heavy silence fell over the camp. Dakota moved to Sarah's side, his presence a quiet affirmation. I'm not going back, she said finally. Not now, maybe not ever. Jedediah finally found his voice. Sarah, don't be foolish. Where will you go? I don't know yet, but I'm leaving with Dakota, if he'll have me. She turned to the Apache, uncertainty flickering across her face. Will you? Dakota studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he nodded once, decisively. Yes, I guide you. Safe place. You can't be serious, Dawson sputtered. He'll kill you the moment you're alone, or worse. He's had plenty of opportunity for both, Sarah replied coolly. Unlike some, he's shown only respect. Jedediah stepped toward her, hand outstretched. Sarah, please. Your parents wouldn't want. My parents taught me to see the goodness in all God's children, she interrupted, her hand moving to where her mother's prayer book lay hidden in her pocket. I think they would understand better than anyone. The decision made, Sarah helped Dakota gather supplies. A canteen, some jerky, a small pot offered silently by Mrs. Henderson. As they prepared to leave, Eli Cooper approached, rifle in hand. The territory's dangerous, he said gruffly, offering the weapon to Sarah. You should take this. She accepted with a nod of thanks, recognizing the gesture for what it was. Not just protection, but acknowledgement of her choice. As they mounted Dakota's horse, Dawson called out one last time, his voice venomous. You'll regret this, girl. Mark my words. Sarah didn't look back as they rode away, but she felt Dakota's steady presence behind her and knew, whatever lay ahead, she had made the right choice. The sun climbed higher as Dakota guided his horse through a landscape few white settlers ever witnessed. They had left the main trails behind hours ago, following instead the hidden paths known only to those who truly understood the desert's secrets. Sarah watched in wonder as Dakota navigated by landmarks invisible to her untrained eye. A particular arrangement of stones, the pattern of vegetation, subtle changes in the terrain. How do you know where we're going? She finally asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Dakota reached into a leather pouch at his waist and withdrew what appeared to be a crudely drawn map on a piece of hide. He held it before her, his arm a warm presence around her waist. My people's lands, he explained, tracing a finger along faded lines. Many generations walk these paths. Father teach son, mother teach daughter. He pointed to their current position, then to a cluster of marks some distance away. Apache camp here. 3 days' ride. Sarah studied the map, fascinated by its simplicity yet accuracy. It contained no words, only symbols marking water sources, dangerous areas, and safe passages. This was knowledge passed through blood and experience, not books and schoolrooms. Is that where we're going? To your people's camp. A shadow crossed Dakota's face. Not yet. White soldiers near camp. Must be careful. He indicated another location. Go here first. Safe place. Friend lives alone. As they continued their journey, the terrain grew increasingly rugged. Twice Dakota dismounted to lead the horse through particularly treacherous passages, his hand steadying Sarah when the ground shifted beneath them. By midday, the heat had become oppressive, the sun a merciless eye watching their progress. "Rest here," Dakota announced, guiding them toward a small copse of cottonwoods nestled against a rock face. A trickle of water seeped from the stones, creating a tiny oasis in the parched landscape. Sarah slid gratefully from the horse, her legs stiff from the unaccustomed riding. Dakota moved with practiced efficiency, securing the horse and checking their surroundings before joining her in the shade. They shared jerky and water in companionable silence. Sarah marveled at how quickly she had grown comfortable in Dakota's presence, how easily they communicated despite the language barrier. There was a directness to him, an absence of the layers of pretense that characterized most interactions in Copper Creek. "You not afraid?" Dakota asked, suddenly his dark eyes studying her face. Sarah considered the question carefully. "I was at first," she admitted. "But not of you exactly. More of everything. The unknown." She gestured to the vast wilderness surrounding them. "I've never been this far from town before." He nodded, understanding. "Desert dangerous for those who don't know it, but beautiful too." He offered her more water. "Like many things, has two faces." As she drank, Sarah noticed a fresh cut on Dakota's forearm, likely received during the previous night's battle. Without thinking, she reached for it. "You're hurt." He glanced at the wound dismissively. "Small scratch. It should be cleaned." She tore another strip from her already diminished shawl and soaked it in water. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Dakota extended his arm. Sarah worked gently, washing away the dried blood and dirt. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, the muscle firm. She felt his eyes on her but kept her focus on the task. "Your people teach healing?" he asked as she tied the makeshift bandage. "My mother did. She believed caring for others was a sacred duty." Sarah smoothed the cloth over his wound. "She would have liked you, I think." A rare smile touched Dakota's lips. "Why?" "She always said true character is revealed in actions, not words." Sarah met his gaze. "You've shown yours many times over." Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition deeper than language could express. Then Dakota rose, the moment breaking like sunlight through clouds. "Should move. Cover more ground before dark." As they prepared to leave, Sarah noticed Dakota scanning the horizon with unusual intensity. "Is something wrong?" He frowned slightly. "Not sure. Feel watched." He mounted behind her, his body suddenly tense. "We take different path. Less open." Their new route proved more challenging, winding through narrow canyons where shadows gathered despite the afternoon sun. Dakota remained vigilant, often stopping to listen to sounds Sarah couldn't hear. His concern gradually transferred to her, and she found herself studying their back trail with growing unease. "Who would follow us?" she whispered after one such pause. Dakota's arm tightened briefly around her waist. "Maybe no one. Maybe Dawson. Man has hate in eyes when looking at you. At me." The possibility sent a chill through Sarah despite the heat. Would he really track us this far? "Hate makes men do foolish things," Dakota replied simply. "We be careful, just in case." As they emerged from a narrow passage into a broader valley, Sarah realized that in a single day, her world had expanded beyond anything she had imagined. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever challenges awaited them, she faced them with a strange, new confidence. With Dakota beside her, the unknown seemed less a threat than a promise. "I tell you, they went this way," Frank Dawson insisted, dismounting to examine the faint impression in the dust. The midday sun beat down mercilessly as he ran his fingers over the barely discernible track. "The Apache is good, but no one's invisible." Tobias Burke wiped sweat from his brow, doubt etched on his sunburned face. "Frank, we've been riding since dawn. The others turned back hours ago." Let them go. Cowards, the lot of them. Dawson straightened, eyes narrowed against the glare. Especially Jedediah, abandoning his own flesh and blood. The third member of their party, a rough-faced man named Harlan Webb who made his living as a tracker, studied the ground with professional interest. The girl and the Apache are traveling light and fast, he observed. 2 on 1 horse, moving northeast. Toward Apache territory, Dawson muttered. Just as I thought. Burke shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. What exactly are we doing here, Frank? The girl chose to go with him. We saw it. Dawson's face hardened. No white woman chooses a savage over her own kind. That's the fever talking or fear. She needs rescuing whether she knows it or not. He patted the brass telescope hanging from his belt. And I mean to be the one who brings her back. What he left unspoken was the humiliation burning in his gut. How the Apache had shown him up during the bandit attack. How Sarah Miller had called him a coward in front of everyone. Such insults demanded answering. There's more to it than that, Webb commented, mounting his horse. You've got something personal against this Apache. Dawson's hand moved unconsciously to the silver pocket watch tucked safely in his vest. Let's just say I don't like being made a fool of. As they rode on, following the trail that grew fainter with each passing mile, Dawson's thoughts darkened like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Down, Dakota whispered, his hand gentle but firm on Sarah's shoulder. They crouched behind a wind-carved boulder, the horse secured in a narrow crevice behind them. Sarah held her breath as Dakota removed a small piece of obsidian from his medicine pouch and used its reflective surface to peer around the rock's edge. 3 riders, he reported softly. 1 mile back, following our trail. Can you see who they are? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. Dakota adjusted the makeshift mirror. Man with hat like Dawson. Skinny one, Burke. Third man I don't know. Sarah's heart sank. They're tracking us. But why? I made my choice clear. Man like Dawson doesn't accept woman's choice. Dakota's voice carried a rare edge. Thinks he owns what he wants. The realization that they were being hunted sent a chill through Sarah despite the desert heat. She thought of Dawson's cold eyes, his casual cruelty, his thinly veiled threats before they departed. What do we do? Dakota studied the terrain ahead, his expression thoughtful. 2 paths. Fight or hide. He looked at her, allowing her to see the question in his eyes. The choice was hers. Sarah considered briefly. These men were my neighbors, my uncle's friends. I don't want bloodshed if we can avoid it. Dakota nodded, respect evident in his slight smile. Then we hide our trail. Make them lose way. They spent the next hour implementing Dakota's strategy. They backtracked along a rocky ridge where their horse left no prints, then descended into a dry streambed that would carry away any scent. Dakota taught Sarah to walk backward in her own footprints, then step carefully onto stones that wouldn't hold an impression. My father taught me these tricks, he explained as they worked, when blue-coat soldiers first came to our lands. Your father, Sarah ventured. Is he still with your tribe? A shadow crossed Dakota's face. Died 2 winters ago. Sickness brought by settlers. There was no accusation in his voice, merely statement of fact. I'm sorry, Sarah said softly, thinking of her own parents. He acknowledged her sympathy with a nod. Was good man. Wise leader. After a pause, he added, taught me to judge each person by own heart, not by people they come from. The simple statement touched Sarah deeply. Here in the wilderness, pursued by her own kind, such wisdom seemed more valuable than all the sermons she'd heard in Copper Creek's little church. By mid-afternoon, they reached a series of narrow canyons where the rock walls rose high on either side. Dakota led them confidently through the labyrinth, occasionally stopping to listen or examine the path ahead. Dangerous place, he warned. Easy to become trapped, but good for losing those who follow. As if confirming his words, a distant shout echoed through the canyons. Their pursuers, perhaps realizing they'd lost the trail. "They're falling behind," Sarah observed, hope rising. Dakota's expression remained cautious. "Man Webb is tracker. Good one. He will find sign eventually. You know him? Know of him? Hunts Apache for army sometimes." Dakota's jaw tightened. Man who can read the desert like book. The implications hung between them, unspoken but understood. Their lead was temporary at best. As sunset approached, they emerged from the canyons into a small valley nestled between towering mesas. Dakota studied the gathering shadows with experienced eyes. "We cross open ground at night," he decided. "Too dangerous in daylight if they have rifle." Sarah nodded, trusting his judgment. As they waited for darkness to fall, she found herself watching Dakota's profile against the deepening blue of the sky. In just 2 days, this man had become her protector, her guide, and something more difficult to define. Whatever happened, she knew she would never again see the world or its people. In the same simple terms, the hidden canyon appeared like a mirage at dawn, a narrow fissure in the towering red rock that widened into a secret world of unexpected beauty. Cottonwoods and willows clustered around a small spring, their green a startling contrast to the surrounding desert. Birdsong filled the air, a cheerful counterpoint to the silence that had dominated their night journey across the open valley. Spirit Canyon, Dakota named it as he helped Sarah dismount. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, and she leaned against him briefly before finding her balance. "Safe place. Good water. No one find us here." After securing their horse in a grassy patch, Dakota led Sarah to the spring. The water bubbled up from beneath a stone, crystal clear and cool. Sarah knelt and drank deeply, then splashed her face, washing away the dust of their journey. "It's beautiful," she said, looking around the sheltered space. "How do you know of this place?" "Vision quest," Dakota replied, gathering wood for a small fire. "Young men of tribe come to such places. Fast, pray, seek guidance from spirits." He arranged the sticks with practiced efficiency. "I stay here 4 days. No food, little water. On 4th day, eagle visit." Sarah watched him coax the fire to life, fascinated by this glimpse into his world. What did the eagle mean? Dakota's hands stilled momentarily. "Mean I must see far, watch over people." He glanced up at her. "Sometimes mean loneliness too." The simple admission touched something in Sarah. Despite their differences, they shared the experience of standing apart, she as the missionary's daughter in a rough settlement, he as a scout who moved between worlds. Once the fire was burning steadily, Dakota produced a small pouch of herbs from his medicine bag. "For your feet," he explained, gesturing to where Sarah's boots had worn blisters on her ankles. "Will help heal." "Thank you." She removed her boots with a wince, revealing raw, reddened skin. Dakota crushed the herbs between his fingers, then mixed them with a little water from the spring. The earthy scent filled the air as he showed her how to apply the poultice. "My mother used similar remedies," Sarah said, the memory bittersweet. People in town called her methods old-fashioned, but they worked better than the doctor's treatments. "Your mother wise woman," Dakota observed. "Learn from nature." "She learned from the Cherokee while my father preached to their settlement." Sarah smiled faintly. The church elders didn't approve, but she said God's wisdom showed itself in many ways. Dakota considered her words. "Your God and Apache mountain spirits perhaps not so different. Both teach respect for life. Both watch over people." It was the longest conversation they'd had, made possible by rest and relative safety. As the morning progressed, they shared the last of their jerky and spoke more freely, each offering pieces of themselves in careful measures. Sarah told of her parents' work among various tribes before their deaths, how they had taught her to read and write alongside their missionary duties. Dakota described his upbringing as the son of a respected leader, his training as both warrior and healer, the difficult balance of preserving tradition while adapting to the changing world. "Why were you alone when we met?" Sarah finally asked. "You mentioned a vision quest, but it seemed interrupted." Dakota was silent for a moment, his gaze on the dancing flames. Tribal council divided. Some want war against settlers. Some want peace. He looked up at her. "I seek answer for my people. Which path leads to survival? And had you found an answer?" "Not yet." His eyes held hers. "Then settlers bring you to me. Change everything." The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to examine it fully. As midday approached, exhaustion from their night journey caught up with them. Dakota insisted Sarah rest while he kept watch. She protested weakly, but her body betrayed her, eyelids growing heavy despite her intentions. "Sleep," Dakota said gently. "I wake you if danger comes." Sarah settled onto a bed of soft grasses he had gathered, using her shawl as a pillow. Before sleep claimed her, she watched Dakota move to the canyon entrance, a silhouette against the bright desert beyond. In just days, she had come to trust this man with her life. The realization should have frightened her, but instead, it brought a strange peace. She woke hours later to find Dakota sitting nearby, weaving something between his fingers. The afternoon light slanted through the canyon, painting the walls with gold and amber. "What are you making?" she asked, voice husky with sleep. He held up his creation, a small web of sinew and willow, with a feather hanging from its center. "Dream catcher," he explained. "Keeps bad dreams away, lets good ones through." He offered it to her. "For you." Sarah accepted the gift, touched by the gesture. "I didn't dream at all," she admitted. "Good sign." Dakota smiled slightly. Body heals, mind at peace. As she examined the intricate weaving, Sarah noticed ancient markings on the canyon wall behind him. Handprints, animal figures, spiraling patterns. The people who made those, she asked, who were they? Dakota followed her gaze. Ancestors. Not Apache, but ancient ones. They speak across time through these marks. He rose and approached the wall, touching one handprint reverently. "They say, we were here. We lived. Remember us." The simplicity and profundity of it struck Sarah deeply. Here in this hidden canyon, surrounded by traces of those long gone, she and Dakota wrote their own story. Unexpected, uncertain, yet somehow right. The river stretched before them like a writhing serpent, swollen with recent mountain rains. What might have been a manageable crossing weeks earlier now presented a formidable barrier. Brown water churning over hidden rocks, carrying debris torn from the highlands. "We cross here?" Sarah asked, unable to keep the apprehension from her voice. Dakota studied the rushing water, his expression grave. "No other way. Mountains too steep north and south." He pointed to distant figures circling in the sky. "Vultures follow Dawson's group. One day behind us now." Their pursuers had proven more persistent than expected. Twice they had nearly caught up, forcing Sarah and Dakota to travel through the night and rest during daylight hours. The strain showed on both their faces, darkened circles beneath their eyes, skin weathered by sun and wind. "How will we get across?" Sarah asked, eyeing the churning water. "Horse swim," Dakota explained. "You hold mane. I guide from behind." He began methodically removing his quiver and knife, securing them in a bundle on his back. "Take off heavy things. Boots. Gun." Sarah followed his instructions, stripping down to her dress and petticoat. She tied her boots around her neck and secured the rifle Eli Cooper had given her in an oilskin wrap borrowed from Dakota's supplies. "Water cold," Dakota warned. "Current strong. When I say hold breath, you hold. Understand?" Sarah nodded, trying to project more confidence than she felt. The dream catcher he had made her hung from a cord around her neck, alongside her mother's small silver cross. She touched both for reassurance. They approached the water's edge, where Dakota tested the footing carefully before allowing his horse to enter. The animal snorted nervously but obeyed, stepping into the shallows with cautious movements. "Stay close to horse," Dakota instructed, one hand on the animal's rump, the other holding a length of rawhide attached to its simple halter. "Water get deep quick." Sarah gasped as the cold water reached her waist, then her chest. The current pulled at her skirts, trying to drag her downstream. She clung to the horse's mane as Dakota had shown her, feeling the powerful muscles working beneath her hands. They were nearly halfway across when disaster struck. A large branch, carried by the current, slammed into the horse's legs. The animal reared in panic, throwing Sarah sideways into the rushing water. The world became a chaotic blur of brown water and blinding spray. Sarah fought to surface, her sodden clothes weighing her down. She caught a glimpse of Dakota diving toward her before the current pulled her under again. Strong hands seized her arm, pulling her upward. She broke the surface with a desperate gasp, coughing and sputtering. "Hold to me," Dakota shouted over the river's roar. "Horse gone ahead." Sarah wrapped her arms around his neck as he swam with powerful strokes, fighting the current that sought to carry them downstream. His face was a mask of determination, muscles straining against nature's fury. "Rock coming," he warned. "Hold breath." Sarah barely had time to gulp air before they were submerged again, Dakota steering them beneath a massive boulder that created a dangerous swirl in the water. Her lungs burned, vision dimming, when suddenly they surfaced in calmer water. "Almost there," Dakota encouraged, his own breathing labored. "Few more strokes." When they finally reached the opposite bank, Sarah collapsed onto the rocky shore, coughing up river water. Dakota crawled beside her, unusually winded. For several minutes, they simply lay there, recovering their strength as the sun warmed their soaked bodies. "You saved my life," Sarah finally managed, her voice raw. Dakota nodded, still catching his breath. "You fight water well. Strong swimmer." "Not strong enough." She pushed wet hair from her face, noticing a new gash on Dakota's forehead where a rock had struck him. "You're hurt." He touched the wound dismissively. "Small cut." His gaze moved downstream where his horse had managed to reach shore and now grazed peacefully. "Horse smarter than us. Find easy way." Despite everything, Sarah laughed, a sudden, bright sound that seemed to surprise them both. Dakota's usual stoicism cracked, and he smiled in return, transforming his face. They retrieved the horse and found a sheltered spot to dry their clothes and take inventory of their supplies. Most had survived in the waterproof pouches Dakota carried, but Sarah's shawl, already reduced to strips for bandages, was gone, swept away by the river. As Dakota built a small fire to ward off the chill, Sarah discovered a leather-bound book in one of the pouches, her mother's journal, which she had kept in her pocket since leaving Copper Creek. The water had barely touched it, protected as it was by the oilskin. "My mother's journal," she explained, seeing Dakota's curious glance. She recorded her thoughts, her observations about the places and people she encountered. Sarah traced the faded cover. The last entry was 2 weeks before she died. Dakota nodded respectfully. "Words that remain when person gone. Powerful medicine." Sarah opened the journal to its final pages, where blank paper awaited. Her mother's journey had ended, but perhaps her own story could continue here. From a small pocket in the journal's binding, she withdrew a stub of pencil. "You write now?" Dakota asked, watching her prepare to mark the page. "I think I should." Sarah met his gaze across the small fire. "Whatever happens, someone should know our story." As she began to write, describing their river crossing and near drowning in careful script, Dakota watched with undisguised interest. "You teach me someday?" he asked, the request carrying more significance than the simple words suggested. Sarah looked up, understanding the trust implicit in his question. "I would be honored," she replied softly. Behind them, the river continued its relentless journey. Ahead, the terrain grew increasingly rugged, and somewhere behind, 3 determined men followed their trail. But in this moment of quiet companionship, As words filled the blank page and flames warmed their skin, Sarah felt something she had not expected to find in the wilderness: possibility. The afternoon sky darkened with unnatural speed, transforming from clear blue to ominous purple-black in less than an hour. Wind whipped across the mesa, bending scrub brush and sending dust devils spinning across exposed rock. In the distance, lightning split the sky, followed by the deep rumble of thunder. "Bad storm coming," Dakota observed, studying the approaching wall of rain. "Desert storm. Dangerous." They had made good progress since the river crossing, putting more distance between themselves and their pursuers. But nature now presented a more immediate threat. "No caves nearby?" Sarah asked, shielding her eyes against the wind. Dakota shook his head. "No time to reach good shelter." He surveyed their surroundings with practiced efficiency. "Must make our own." He guided them to a shallow depression where two large boulders leaned against each other, creating a natural windbreak. With swift, sure movements, he began gathering materials: branches, brush, stones, showing Sarah how to help. "Like this," he instructed, demonstrating how to weave branches into a frame. Apache shelter for hunting trips. Not permanent, but strong. They worked together with growing urgency as the storm drew closer. Sarah's hands, once soft from indoor work, were now calloused and capable. She followed Dakota's instructions without hesitation, their movements becoming synchronized through shared purpose. The first heavy raindrops struck just as they finished securing a tarp of woven reeds over the framework. Dakota ushered Sarah inside, then led the horse to a protected area behind one of the boulders, covering it with a second, smaller shelter. Inside their makeshift refuge, space was limited. Sarah sat with her back against one stone wall, knees drawn up, while Dakota crouched at the entrance, watching the storm's approach. Wind howled around them, finding every gap in their hastily constructed shelter. "Will it hold?" Sarah asked as a particularly strong gust rattled their roof. "If we help it." Dakota moved deeper inside, his shoulder brushing against hers in the confined space. "When wind comes, push here." He indicated the support poles. "Keep steady." The full fury of the storm descended upon them moments later. Rain hammered against their shelter like 1,000 tiny fists. Lightning flashed with blinding regularity, illuminating their refuge in stark white bursts. With each powerful gust, they braced the supports together, their hands sometimes overlapping in the shared task. During one tremendous thunderclap that seemed to shake the very earth, Sarah instinctively grabbed Dakota's arm. He placed his hand over hers, a reassuring pressure. "Storm spirits angry tonight," he said, his voice low and close to her ear. "You believe in storm spirits?" Sarah asked, grateful for the conversation that distracted from the tempest's rage. "All things have spirit," Dakota explained. "Mountains, rivers, storms. Not like white man's God, separate from world. Spirits are the world." A flash of lightning illuminated his face, strong features etched with shadows, eyes reflecting the momentary brightness. In that instant, Sarah saw him with new clarity, not as the Apache warrior or savage of settler tales, but simply as a man, complex, thoughtful, bound to his beliefs as she was to hers. "My father preached that God created everything," she said as darkness returned. "But my mother always said God was also in everything. That's why she learned the healing ways of the tribes we visited. She said wisdom didn't belong to just one people." Dakota was silent for a moment. "Your mother understood what many forget." As the storm continued its assault, their conversation deepened. Huddled together against nature's fury, they shared memories normally kept private: Dakota's childhood training with his father, Sarah's dreams of teaching before her parents' deaths, small joys and sorrows that had shaped them both. "I used to climb the tallest tree near our mission house," Sarah confessed, smiling at the memory. "My father would be teaching scripture while I watched birds build their nests above his head." "Like little bird yourself," Dakota observed, a rare teasing note in his voice. Now flying from nest. Not exactly by choice, Sarah replied, but without bitterness. Though I can't imagine returning to that life now. A powerful gust found a weakness in their shelter, partially collapsing one side. Rain began to seep through, cold droplets falling on their shoulders. Without discussion, they moved in tandem to repair the damage. Dakota braced the main support while Sarah rewove the branches that had come loose. Their bodies pressed close in the confined space, no longer awkward but necessary, comfortable. When the repair was complete, they didn't move apart. The storm had brought a chill to the desert air, and shared warmth was practical. At least, that's what Sarah told herself as she remained beside Dakota. Their shoulders touching, their breathing gradually synchronizing. Storm passing soon, he said after a while, listening to the changing rhythm of the rain. But better wait until morning to travel. Sarah nodded, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. Days of vigilance and hard travel had drained her reserves. Her eyelids grew heavy as the adrenaline of the storm response faded. Rest, Dakota encouraged, adjusting his position so she could lean more comfortably against his shoulder. I keep watch. You need rest too, she murmured, already half asleep. We'll rest later. Apache can go many days when needed. Sarah wanted to argue but found herself sliding into slumber instead. The last thing she registered was the gentle pressure of something being placed over her. Dakota's leather vest, still warm from his body. She dreamed of rivers and storms, of pursuit and escape, but through it all ran a thread of security she had not felt since childhood. When she woke briefly in the night, she found Dakota still beside her, his watchful gaze fixed on the shelter's entrance, one hand resting protectively near hers. Outside, the storm had gentled to a steady rain, its earlier violence spent. Inside, in their small woven world, something new had been constructed alongside their shelter, fragile yet resilient, unspoken yet understood. Morning revealed a transformed landscape. The storm had scoured the desert clean, leaving behind pools of shimmering water in rock depressions and bringing forth an explosion of scent from rain-soaked sage and creosote. As Sarah emerged from their shelter, she inhaled deeply, savoring the rare desert perfume. Dakota was already tending to the horse, his movements economical and practiced. He acknowledged her with a nod, a quiet familiarity having settled between them after the intimacy of the storm-bound night. Sleep well? He asked. Better than I expected, Sarah admitted, stretching muscles stiff from the confined space. She returned his vest with a grateful smile. Thank you for the loan. They broke their fast with the last of their provisions, a handful of parched corn and dried berries from Dakota's pouch. The meager meal highlighted their need to replenish supplies soon. How far? To your friend's place? Sarah asked as they dismantled their shelter, careful to leave no trace of their passing. 1 day's ride, Dakota replied. Maybe less if trail good after rain. They set out as the sun cleared the eastern mesas, following a path that wound through rocky terrain punctuated by juniper and pinyon. Sarah noted how the storm had erased their tracks, and likely those of their pursuers as well. Perhaps Dawson and his men had abandoned the chase during the tempest. Midday found them traversing a high plateau with sweeping views of the surrounding territory. Dakota rode with increased vigilance, frequently scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. What is it? Sarah finally asked. This place, hunting grounds for my people, he explained. Other Apache might be near. No sooner had he spoken than he stiffened, head tilted as though listening to something beyond Sarah's perception. He reined the horse to a stop, one hand raised for silence. Riders coming, he said softly. Apache hunters. Sarah's heart quickened. Will they be friendly? Depends. Dakota's expression was unreadable. Stay close. Let me speak first. They hadn't long to wait. Minutes later, four mounted warriors appeared from behind a rocky outcropping, approaching with cautious deliberation. Each carried a rifle, and their faces were painted for hunting. They halted some distance away, studying the odd pair with undisguised suspicion. One rider separated from the group, advancing slowly. His horse was adorned with symbols of status, feathers, and beadwork that marked him as a leader. Dakota raised his hand in greeting and spoke in rapid Apache. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but she recognized her name mentioned several times. The hunters' gazes shifted to her, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. The exchange grew more animated, voices rising. One hunter gestured sharply toward Sarah, his tone accusatory. Dakota's response was firm but measured, his posture remaining relaxed even as tension crackled in the air. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, the leader nodded once and made a beckoning motion. Dakota turned to Sarah. "We go with them," he said quietly. "Short way. Elder with them wants to see you." "Is it safe?" Sarah whispered. "Yes. I vouch for you." They accept, for now. They followed the hunting party to a small encampment nestled in a protected valley. Several temporary shelters had been erected around a central fire, where an elderly man sat wrapped in a colorful blanket despite the day's warmth. Curious eyes tracked their progress as Dakota helped Sarah dismount. Women paused in their work, children whispered behind cupped hands, and the hunters maintained a vigilant circle around them. Dakota led Sarah to the elder, whose deeply lined face showed neither welcome nor hostility, only patient assessment. Up close, Sarah could see the milky film of partial blindness clouding his eyes, though his gaze remained sharp. A lengthy conversation followed, with Dakota explaining their situation in his native tongue. The elder occasionally interjected with questions, his weathered hand tapping against his knee as he listened. Several times his clouded eyes turned toward Sarah, seeming to look through her rather than at her. Finally, he spoke directly to her in halting English. Why you trust Dakota?" The unexpected question momentarily flustered Sarah. She glanced at Dakota, who gave no indication of what she should say. This was her test alone. "He had every reason to harm me when my people treated him dishonorably," she answered carefully. "Instead, he showed compassion and courage. He saved my life more than once." She met the elder's milky gaze directly. "I trust him because he has earned that trust." The elder considered her words, then slowly nodded. From around his neck, he removed a small white feather attached to a leather cord. With gnarled fingers, he extended it toward Sarah. "Take," he instructed. "White feather mean peace between strangers, protection on journey." Sarah accepted the gift with both hands, as she had seen Dakota receive objects of importance. "Thank you," she said, bowing her head slightly. The elder's face creased in what might have been a smile. He spoke again to Dakota, who listened with evident respect before replying. "What did he say?" Sarah asked when the exchange concluded. "Says bluecoats moving more soldiers to area," Dakota translated. "Looking for Apache camps. Also says tribal council asking for me. Important decision coming." He glanced at her. "Says white woman with Apache brings danger to both." "He wants me to leave you," Sarah guessed, her heart sinking. "No." Dakota's hand brushed hers briefly. "Says choice is ours, but warns path not easy." The hunting party shared their food, fresh rabbit and pine nuts, before Sarah and Dakota continued their journey. As they prepared to depart, the elder approached once more, speaking softly to Sarah. "He says wear feather where others can see," Dakota translated. "Says your spirit strong like Apache woman. But remember, not all see with clear eyes." As they rode away from the temporary camp, Sarah fingered the white feather now hanging alongside her mother's silver cross. Two symbols from different worlds, both representing protection and faith. Like the woman who now wore them, they existed together, neither diminishing the other. The glint of metal in the distance caught Dakota's sharp eye first. He reined the horse to an abrupt halt, guiding it behind an outcropping of rock with practiced stealth. "What is it?" Sarah whispered, feeling his sudden tension. Bluecoats, he replied, voice low. Many horses. Patrol, not hunting party. Sarah's stomach tightened. U.S. cavalry soldiers represented safety to most settlers, but their current situation complicated matters considerably. A white woman traveling alone with an Apache warrior would raise immediate suspicion, or worse. Can we go around them? She asked. Dakota studied the terrain with calculating eyes. No good path. Valley narrows ahead. They control the pass. He pointed to where uniformed men on horseback moved in disciplined formation through the landscape below. Must wait. Hide until dark. They retreated to a sheltered position that offered concealment while allowing them to observe the soldiers' movements. As they settled in for an unexpected delay, Sarah noticed a small brass button gleaming in the dirt. A military button, evidence that soldiers had used this same vantage point previously. I count 15 men, she murmured, watching the patrol establish a temporary camp near a small spring. Looks like they plan to stay a while. Dakota nodded grimly, watching trail to Apache territories. Setting trap. The soldiers' voices occasionally carried up to their hiding place on the light breeze, fragments of conversation drifting in and out of hearing. Sarah strained to catch their words, gleaning bits of information. Orders from Fort Grant. Relocate all hostiles. New reservation policy. She relayed what she heard to Dakota, whose expression darkened with each report. Relocation, he repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. Take Apache from hunting grounds. Put behind fences like animals. Many tribes already suffer this fate. They're talking about moving your people? Sarah asked, horrified by the implication. Government makes treaty. Apache sign in good faith. Then white men want more land. Make new treaty. Dakota's voice remained level, but anger smoldered in his eyes. This story, told many times, always ends same way. As the afternoon progressed, the patrol showed no signs of moving on. The soldiers set up a proper camp, posting sentries at strategic points. Their thoroughness suggested they intended to remain overnight, perhaps longer. We could try another route, Sarah suggested. Even if it takes longer. Dakota considered this but shook his head. Other paths more dangerous. Rock slides. No water. He studied the position of the sun. Wait for dark. Then move quiet, like shadow. They shared the last of their water, rationing it carefully against the desert heat. To pass the time and distract themselves from thirst, Sarah showed Dakota entries from her mother's journal, simple sketches of plants and their medicinal uses, observations about tribal customs, reflections on faith and nature. Your mother saw truth? Dakota remarked, carefully turning the delicate pages with respectful fingers. Wrote down wisdom for daughter. Good gift. She would have liked you, Sarah said softly. She always saw people as individuals, not as the labels others gave them. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken eventually by a change in the soldiers' activity below. Several mounted and rode out in a scouting pattern, including a path that would bring them dangerously close to the hiding place. We must move, Dakota whispered urgently. Now. They retreated further up the rocky slope, leading the horse with extreme care to avoid dislodging stones. The loose soil made for treacherous footing, and as they rounded a sharp bend, Sarah's ankle twisted beneath her. She suppressed a cry of pain, but couldn't prevent her fall. The small avalanche of pebbles her stumble created seemed deafening in the tense silence. Below, a soldier's head snapped up, eyes scanning the slopes. You hear that, Sergeant? His voice carried clearly. Probably just a mountain goat, came the reply. But check it out. Dakota pulled Sarah into a crevice barely large enough for them both, his body shielding hers as hoofbeats approached. She held her breath, acutely aware of his heartbeat against her shoulder, strong and steady despite the danger. The soldier passed within 20 feet of their position, close enough that Sarah could see the dust on his blue uniform, the sweat staining his hat, even a missing button on his jacket. perhaps the very one now hidden in her pocket. Long minutes passed before the soldier finally turned back, apparently satisfied that nothing warranted further investigation. Only then did Dakota ease away from Sarah, his eyes immediately going to her ankle. "You hurt," he stated, not a question but an assessment. "It's nothing," she insisted, but when she tried to stand, pain shot up her leg. Without comment, Dakota examined the injury with gentle fingers. "Not broken. Bad twist." He produced a strip of leather from his pouch and bound the ankle with practiced efficiency. "Can you walk?" Sarah tested her weight gingerly. "Yes, but I'll slow us down." A muscle twitched in Dakota's jaw as he weighed their options. The afternoon was waning, but several hours of daylight remained before they could attempt to slip past the patrol under cover of darkness. "I carry you if needed," he said finally, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We find better hiding place first." He helped her onto the horse, then led them on a careful retreat up the slope, away from the patrol's line of sight. Sarah bit her lip against the pain, determined not to become a burden. Yet even in her discomfort, she couldn't help noticing how their situation had shifted. Now she was the one who needed protection, and Dakota provided it without hesitation. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain, Sarah caught Dakota watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "What is it?" she asked. He seemed to consider his words carefully before responding. "Many whites see Apache as enemy. Many Apache see whites as enemy." His dark eyes held hers. "But you and me, we see differently now." In that simple observation lay a profound truth that neither could have anticipated when their paths first crossed. Whatever dangers lay ahead, soldiers, settlers, or Sarah's own people, they would face them with this new understanding between them. Twilight painted the narrow canyon in shades of amber and shadow as Sarah and Dakota picked their way along the rocky floor. They had successfully evaded the cavalry patrol by waiting until nightfall, then circling wide around their position. Sarah's ankle, while still tender, had improved enough for careful travel with Dakota's support. "Almost through," Dakota murmured, scanning the towering walls that rose on either side. "Open country beyond." The canyon constricted ahead, barely wide enough for their horse to pass through. It was the most vulnerable point of their journey. No escape routes, no room to maneuver if trouble came. Sarah fingered her mother's silver pendant nervously, the familiar weight against her collarbone offering small comfort. "How much farther to your friend's place?" "Few hours. Reach by morning if—" The sharp crack of a rifle shot interrupted him, the bullet ricocheting off stone inches from Dakota's head. He reacted instantly, pulling Sarah behind the meager cover of a boulder as a second shot echoed through the canyon. "Dawson?" Dakota hissed, eyes already locating the source of fire, a shadowy figure on the canyon rim. "Well now, isn't this cozy?" Frank Dawson's voice floated down from above, amplified by the canyon walls. "End of the trail for you too." Sarah peered around the boulder to see Dawson, Burke, and Webb positioned strategically along the canyon edge, rifles trained on their position. They had walked straight into an ambush. "This doesn't have to end badly, Miss Miller," Dawson called. "Just step away from the savage and come up the trail to your right. No one needs to die today." Dakota's hand moved to his knife, his expression grim. They both knew the offer was hollow. Dawson had no intention of letting either of them leave alive. "We're pinned down," Sarah whispered. "What do we do?" "When I move, you run," Dakota replied, checking the load in his rifle. "Canyon opens ahead. Find cover." "I'm not leaving you." Her voice rose with emotion. "Sarah." He rarely used her name, and the sound of it stopped her protest. "Trust me one more time." Before she could respond, he fired 2 quick shots toward their attackers, forcing them to duck. In the brief respite, he pushed her toward the narrow passage. "Now, go!" Heart pounding, Sarah ran, her injured ankle screaming in protest. Behind her, she heard the exchange of gunfire as Dakota provided covering fire. Ahead, the canyon widened slightly, offering more substantial rock formations for shelter. She had almost reached safety when Dawson's voice rang out again. "Stop right there, girl, or I put a bullet in your Apache friend." Sarah froze, turning slowly to see Dawson had maneuvered to a position directly above Dakota, rifle aimed at his exposed back. Dakota was caught between attackers, unable to cover all angles at once. In that moment, Sarah made a decision that would have been unthinkable days earlier. She moved deliberately into the open, placing herself between Dakota and Dawson's rifle. "If you want him, you'll have to shoot through me first," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "Sarah, no." Dakota's protest carried raw emotion she'd never heard from him before. Dawson's face contorted with rage. "You'd die for this savage? Have you lost your mind, girl?" "He's shown more humanity than any of you," Sarah replied, standing her ground despite the rifle aimed at her chest. "This has gone far enough, Frank. Let us pass. After we've tracked you for days? After what you've done to your reputation?" Dawson's laugh held no humor. "There's no going back for you now. The whole territory will know you've gone Indian. Then so be it." Sarah raised her chin defiantly. "I choose my own path." For a moment, the canyon hung in tense silence. Then Dawson's finger tightened on the trigger. "Your choice, your consequences." The shot cracked through the air. Sarah felt something strike her chest, a stunning impact that knocked her backward. Her hand flew to the source of sudden pain, fingers finding her mother's silver pendant, now bent and misshapen where the bullet had struck it. Dakota's roar of fury echoed off the canyon walls as he launched himself toward Dawson, all caution abandoned. He scaled the rocky slope with incredible speed, driven by a rage that transformed him from cautious scout to warrior. Burke fired wildly, missing as Dakota zigzagged up the incline. Webb took more careful aim, his bullet grazing Dakota's arm but failing to slow his advance. Sarah struggled to her feet, dazed but alive thanks to the silver pendant that had deflected Dawson's shot. Through blurred vision, she saw Dakota reach Dawson, knife flashing in the fading light. The two men grappled at the canyon's edge, a desperate struggle of strength and will. Dawson's greater bulk against Dakota's lightning reflexes. Burke moved to help his companion, taking aim at Dakota's back. "Behind you!" Sarah screamed. Dakota spun, using Dawson as a shield. Burke hesitated, unwilling to risk hitting his friend. In that moment of indecision, Dakota struck, his knife finding Dawson's arm. The wounded man howled in pain, his rifle tumbling into the canyon below. Webb, seeing the tide turn, abandoned his position and fled. Burke, after a moment's hesitation, followed suit, leaving Dawson alone to face Dakota's fury. Blood streaming from his wounded arm, Dawson backed away, eyes wild with fear. "You wouldn't kill an unarmed man," he gasped. "That'd prove everything they say about your kind." Dakota advanced, knife ready. "You tried to kill women who showed only honor. What does that prove about your kind?" Sarah climbed toward them, her voice cutting through the tension. "Dakota, please, don't become what he believes you are." Something in her words reached him. Dakota's hand lowered slightly, though his gaze never left Dawson. "Go," he ordered the settler. "Tell others what happened here. Truth, not lies." Dawson didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled away, clutching his wounded arm, repeatedly glancing back as if expecting a knife in his back. When he disappeared from view, Dakota turned to Sarah, his warrior's mask falling away to reveal naked concern. "You could have died," he said simply, fingers gently touching the dented pendant at her throat. "So could you," she replied softly. In the deepening dusk, surrounded by the evidence of violence narrowly averted, they stood facing each other, the last barriers between them crumbling like the ancient stones of the canyon walls. The small cave nestled in the hillside provided perfect refuge. defensible, hidden from casual observation, and blissfully cool compared to the punishing heat outside. Dakota had carried Sarah there after she collapsed, the delayed shock of her near-death experience finally overtaking her once they were clear of the canyon. A small fire cast flickering shadows against the rough stone walls as Dakota gently bathed the angry bruise spreading across Sarah's chest where the bullet had struck her pendant. Though the silver had saved her life, the impact had left its mark, a perfect circular bruise darkening to purple beneath her collarbone. "Hurts to breathe," Sarah whispered, wincing as Dakota applied a poultice of crushed herbs. "Ribs not broken, badly bruised." His hands moved with practiced care, his touch clinical yet somehow tender. "Medicine help with pain. Need rest to heal." Sarah nodded weakly, her eyes never leaving his face. In the firelight, she could see the tightly controlled emotion behind his stoic expression. Concern, lingering anger, and something deeper she couldn't quite name. "You could have died," he said again, echoing his words from the canyon. "Why stand between me and gun?" The question hung between them, demanding truth. Sarah reached up with trembling fingers to touch the bent pendant that had saved her life. "I couldn't bear to watch you die," she answered simply. "Not when I could prevent it." Dakota's hands stilled momentarily. No one ever stood between Apache and bullet before. His voice held wonder tinged with confusion. "Especially not white woman." "I'm not just white woman anymore," Sarah replied softly. "And you're not just Apache to me." Something shifted in Dakota's expression, a subtle softening around his eyes, a vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to show. He resumed his ministrations in silence, but the quality of that silence had changed, filled with unspoken understanding. Fever claimed Sarah that night, her body's response to trauma and exhaustion. She drifted in and out of consciousness, past and present blurring together in feverish dreams. Sometimes she was back in the mission house with her parents, sometimes in her uncle's store in Copper Creek, sometimes in the canyon with Dawson's bullet flying toward her in agonizing slow motion. Throughout her delirium, Dakota remained a constant presence. He bathed her forehead with cool water, spooned herbal tea between her parched lips, and murmured soft words in Apache that she couldn't understand but found soothing nonetheless. In her more lucid moments, Sarah watched him working nearby, weaving a small circular frame with intricate patterns of sinew and beads, his strong hands displaying surprising delicacy. "What are you making?" she asked during one such interval. He showed her the partially completed object. "Dream catcher, like one from Canyon but stronger. Special medicine." "For me," he nodded. "Keep bad dreams away while you heal." His eyes met hers. "You spoke in sleep, called for mother, father, called for Dakota too." Heat that had nothing to do with fever rose in Sarah's cheeks. "What did I say?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Many things, some in fever language I not understand." He hesitated. "Some things, about feelings, about us." Sarah closed her eyes, mortified yet somehow relieved. The fever had given voice to thoughts she'd kept carefully guarded. "Do not worry," Dakota continued. "Fever words are like dream words, only true if heart says same when awake." His sensitivity surprised her, this warrior who could track a man for days yet understand the delicate terrain of human emotions. She reached for his hand, her fingers closing weakly around his. "The fever didn't lie," she whispered. Days passed as Sarah slowly regained her strength. Dakota left only briefly to hunt and check their surroundings, always returning to continue her care. They existed in a world of their own making, removed from the prejudices and dangers that awaited beyond their sanctuary. On the third morning, Sarah woke feeling truly clear-headed for the first time. She found Dakota asleep nearby, the completed dream catcher hanging from a jutting rock above her. The intricate object caught the early light, sending small rainbows dancing across the cave walls. She studied his face in repose, Struck by how much younger he appeared in sleep, the constant vigilance temporarily set aside. The strong planes of his cheeks, the slight furrow between his brows that remained even in slumber, the faint scar along his jawline she'd never noticed before, each detail precious in its revelation of the man beyond the warrior. As if sensing her gaze, Dakota's eyes opened, instantly alert. Seeing her watching him, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually solemn features. "Fever gone," he observed, moving to check her forehead with the back of his hand. "Eyes clear again." "Thanks to your care," Sarah replied, capturing his hand and holding it against her cheek. "You saved my life." "You saved mine first," he reminded her. "In Canyon. Then we're even." Dakota shook his head. "Not about even. About." He searched for the right word. "Connection." The simple term somehow encompassed everything that had grown between them. Trust, respect, understanding, and emotions neither was quite ready to name but both increasingly acknowledged. Sarah sat up carefully, testing her healing body. The bruise had faded to yellowing edges, and her breathing came easier now. "How long before we can travel?" "One more day," Dakota decided after assessing her condition. "Friend's place not far." He helped her stand and walk to the cave entrance, where morning light bathed the landscape in gold. Below, a vast expanse of desert stretched toward distant mountains. Beautiful, harsh, unforgiving, yet somehow home now in a way Copper Creek had never been. "When we reach your friend," Sarah asked hesitantly. "What then?" Dakota considered her question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Then we decide. Together." In that simple answer lay a promise neither could have imagined when first they met. A future determined not by others' expectations or society's boundaries, but by their own heart's truth. Smoke from cooking fires rose in thin columns against the early morning sky as Dakota and Sarah approached the Apache village. They had traveled through the night, guided by stars and Dakota's intimate knowledge of the land. Their stay with his friend, an elderly medicine man who lived alone in a cave dwelling, had restored Sarah's strength and provided them with fresh supplies for the final leg of their journey. Now, as the village came into view, Sarah felt her heart quicken with apprehension. This was Dakota's home, his people. Would they see her as an intruder? An enemy? "Many eyes watch us already," Dakota murmured, indicating the seemingly empty hillsides where sentries maintained vigilant observation. "Word of our coming travels ahead." As if confirming his statement, 3 mounted warriors appeared from behind a rock formation, moving to intercept them. Sarah recognized one, the hunting party leader they had encountered days earlier. The men exchanged formal greetings in Apache, their expressions guarded but not openly hostile. Their gazes repeatedly shifted to Sarah, who sat straight-backed behind Dakota, the white feather from the elder prominently displayed alongside her mother's dented silver pendant. After a brief discussion, the warriors gestured for them to follow, providing escort rather than interference. As they entered the village proper, activity slowed then stopped entirely. Women paused in their work, children ceased their play, and elders emerged from dwellings to witness the unprecedented arrival. A white woman riding freely into their camp, not as captive but as companion to one of their most respected warriors. Dakota maintained a dignified silence as they were led to the center of the village where a group of men had gathered. The tribal council, Sarah guessed from their bearing and the deference shown by others. At their center stood an older man whose decorated headband and multiple necklaces marked him as a person of authority. "Chief Nayandi," Dakota explained quietly. "My father's cousin. Wise leader." They dismounted, and Dakota stepped forward to address the council. Sarah remained a respectful distance behind, conscious of dozens of eyes studying her every movement. The white feather seemed to provoke particular interest, whispered comments passing through the gathered crowd. The discussion grew animated, voices rising and falling in patterns Sarah couldn't understand but recognized as debate. Dakota spoke at length, occasionally gesturing toward her. Chief Nayandi listened impassively, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, the chief approached Sarah directly. Unlike the elder they had met with the hunting party, he spoke no English. Instead, he studied her face with penetrating intensity, as if reading her character in her eyes. After a long moment, he spoke to Dakota, who translated. Chief asks why white woman wears Apache protection feather and stands with head high in enemy camp. Sarah considered her words carefully, aware that her answer carried significance beyond simple explanation. Tell him I wear the feather with honor and gratitude. I stand tall because I come in friendship, not fear. As Dakota translated, a murmur passed through the watching crowd. The chief nodded slowly, then spoke again. He says you may stay 3 days while council decides. You will stay in my mother's dwelling, Dakota explained. Great honor. Shows trust. An elderly woman stepped forward, her face deeply lined but her eyes bright with intelligence. She beckoned to Sarah with a gnarled hand, her expression not exactly welcoming but not hostile either, simply evaluating. Go with her, Dakota encouraged. I must speak with counsel. Explain many things. Sarah hesitated, suddenly reluctant to be separated from her companion after so many days of constant togetherness. Will you be all right? A rare smile touched his lips. This my home, Sarah. Question is, will you? Before she could respond, he turned back to the council, shoulders straight and head high. The respected warrior returned to his people, resuming his place among them. The old woman, Dakota's mother, led Sarah to a dwelling on the village's edge. Inside, it was surprisingly cool and comfortable, with woven mats covering the floor and neatly arranged possessions speaking of a well-ordered life. Through gestures and the few Apache words Sarah had learned, the older woman indicated where she could rest and store her few belongings. There was no warmth in the interaction, but neither was there hostility, merely watchful assessment. As the day progressed, Sarah remained largely inside the dwelling, honoring her hostess's unspoken preference. Occasionally young children would peer curiously through the entrance, only to be shooed away by passing adults. By evening, when Dakota finally appeared, Sarah's isolation had grown heavy indeed. Your people have decided to send me away, she guessed from his solemn expression. No. He sat beside her on a woven mat. Council still talks. Some fear you bring soldiers. Others say white woman who risks life for Apache deserves chance. His hand found hers in the dwelling's shadows. Mother says you sit patient all day, not complain. Good sign. She hasn't spoken a word to me, Sarah observed. Not with mouth. Apache women watch with eyes, judge with heart. Dakota's fingers tightened around hers. Tonight, women prepare special meal. You invited. The gathering around the central fire that evening proved to be a turning point. Under the protective presence of Dakota and the watchful eyes of his mother, Sarah was introduced to the women of the tribe. Initial stiffness gradually yielded to cautious interaction as they shared food and observed her manners and responses. When Sarah complimented a young mother's infant using one of the Apache phrases Dakota had taught her, a subtle shift occurred. The women exchanged glances, a silent communication passing among them. An older woman approached, carrying a beautifully decorated dress. For ceremony tomorrow, Dakota explained, surprise evident in his voice. Great honor means women accept you. As Sarah accepted the gift with appropriate reverence, she caught a glimpse of Dakota's mother. For the first time, the old woman's stern expression had softened, the faintest hint of approval in her dark eyes. That night, as stars blanketed the desert sky, Sarah wrote in her journal by the light of a small fire. The words flowed easily, recording not just events but emotions, insights, transformations. She had entered a world few white women had seen, much less been welcomed into. Whatever came next, This experience had forever altered her understanding of what was possible between people of different worlds. Nearby, the dream catcher Dakota had made during her fever hung from a dwelling post, spinning gently in the night breeze, catching starlight in its intricate web. Much as she had been caught in the unexpected web of connection with a man and a people she had been taught to fear. Dawn's first light bathed the village in golden hues as Sarah emerged from Dakota's mother's dwelling. 3 days had passed since their arrival, days filled with cautious integration into tribal life, learning Apache ways, and earning fragile trust through consistent respect and willingness to contribute. The ceremonial dress gifted to her had been worn the previous evening during a gathering where she had been formally introduced to the entire tribe. Though many still regarded her with suspicion, outright hostility had given way to guarded acceptance. She found Dakota at the village's edge, gazing toward the eastern mountains. His posture, straight-backed yet somehow burdened, told her something had changed. "Riders came in night," he said without preamble as she joined him. "Scouts with news. Blue-coat soldiers move this way. Many horses, many guns." Sarah's heart sank. "Because of me? No. Orders from Fort. All Apache to be moved to reservation at San Carlos." His voice held controlled anger. "Land promised to us in treaty now wanted for mining cattle. What will your people do? Council meets now. Some say fight. Some say hide in mountains." He turned to her, his eyes solemn. "Some say accept reservation to survive." The weight of the moment pressed upon them both. This was not just about their personal journey anymore, but the fate of an entire people, Dakota's people, who now faced existential threat. "What do you believe is right?" Sarah asked softly. Dakota was silent for a long moment. "Fighting brings death to many. Reservation brings slow death to all." His gaze returned to the mountains. "But there is third path. Small group could go north, join Lakota cousins. Start new life where Apache ways can continue." Understanding dawned. "You're considering leading such a group?" He nodded. "Chief asked this of me last night. Says I have seen both worlds, can guide people safely." His hand found hers, a gesture now familiar yet still precious. "But must know first, what path does Sarah choose?" The question hung between them, fraught with significance. This was the crossroads they had been approaching since that first moment when he cut her bonds instead of accepting the settler's cruel gift. Sarah took a deep breath. "When I left Copper Creek, I had no destination in mind, only escape. Now I realize I was searching for something I never had there. Belonging. Purpose." She met his gaze directly. "I found both with you." Something profound shifted in Dakota's expression, a vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to show. "Path will be dangerous. Hard. Many whites not understand woman who chooses Apache way. Many Apache may not understand either," Sarah acknowledged. "But we can show them another way is possible. Not just survival, but a new path that honors both our traditions." From within her pocket, Sarah withdrew 2 simple bands fashioned during quiet moments over the past days, one of silver from her pendant, hammered flat and polished, the other carved from wood and inlaid with tiny turquoise pieces given by Dakota's mother in a silent gesture of acceptance. "In my tradition, these symbolize commitment," she explained, offering the wooden band to him. "A promise to walk life's path together, whatever comes." Dakota accepted the token with reverence, understanding its significance without need for elaboration. From his medicine pouch, he produced something in return, a small deerskin pouch decorated with intricate beadwork. "In Apache way, man gives woman sacred pollen when asking to join lives," he said, placing it in her palm. "Shows promise to provide, protect, respect." Their fingers intertwined, the exchange of cultural symbols bridging worlds that had seemed irreconcilably separate only weeks before. The moment was interrupted by a young warrior approaching at a run. He spoke rapidly to Dakota, his expression urgent. "Council calls us," Dakota translated. "Decision must be made now." Soldiers seen in valley below. As they hurried toward the central gathering place, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever came next, flight, confrontation, or some path yet unimagined, the choice had already been made in her heart. The council circle fell silent as they entered. Chief Nayandi rose, addressing Dakota at length before turning expectant eyes to Sarah. Chief asks if white woman who wears Apache dress understands what it means to choose our way. Dakota translated. Says path north will be hard. Many moons of travel. No turning back. Sarah stepped forward, the ceremonial dress moving with her like a second skin. She spoke clearly, pausing to allow Dakota to translate her words. Tell your chief that I understand the choice before me. I was thrown to an Apache as a joke, but found instead my most treasured protector. I know now that home is not a place, but the people with whom you walk through life. As Dakota relayed her words, murmurs of approval spread through the gathered tribe. The chief nodded slowly, his weathered face softening with something approaching respect. The decision was made swiftly after that. 30 members of the tribe would journey north under Dakota's leadership, while others would scatter temporarily into the mountains, avoiding capture until the soldiers' vigilance waned. By midday, preparations were complete. Essential supplies were distributed, roles assigned, the route determined. Sarah found herself accepted without question as part of the northern group, Dakota's mother among those who would travel with them. As they mounted to depart, Sarah cast one last glance at the village that had briefly been her home. The dwellings would be dismantled after their departure, leaving no trace for pursuing soldiers to find. A people adapting to survive, as they had for generations. Dakota nudged his horse alongside hers, the wooden band she had made now secured on a leather cord around his neck, visible to all as a declaration. Ready? He asked simply. Sarah touched the small pouch of sacred pollen now hanging beside her mother's silver cross and the white feather of protection, symbols of the journey that had brought her here and the journey yet to come. Ready, she affirmed, as they rode together toward the northern horizon, neither victims of circumstance nor captives of the past, but architects of a future of their own making.